My name's Corey. I'm a drug addict and alcoholic. Grateful to be here, sober today by the grace and power of a loving higher power, the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've done this work as it's laid out in this book with the help of a sponsor. I've come to form a relationship with a power greater than myself of my understanding. Try to practice these principles on a daily basis to the best of my ability in all my affairs. I've fallen back on formal amends, but I get the opportunity, usually on a daily basis, to make direct amends to people I just come in contact with on a daily basis. So try to stay up on that. You know you're going to speak, so you kind of come up with some stuff you're going to say. Then you go through the reading, and it's like so much more that just pops out at you. But I want to give a little snapshot of almost 5 years ago. I found myself living in a shelter in Boston that I had grown up around, and was pretty poor reputation. I had just been released once again from incarceration, and I was sitting on a bench in a park close to where I'd grown up, and I felt alone. I felt a sense of hopelessness, confusion, disgust, self-pity, I had a choice, I guess, at that point. And I'd had this choice many times. And it was to continue to do what I've always done, or try to find a way out. And for me, a way out meant just appease the people or the pressure that was on me, be it probation, court. My solutions were go to detox, get in a treatment program, try to get out of the jackpot I had found myself in once again. So that seemed more appealing to me at that moment than going out, chasing what I was after, and ending up in handcuffs in a jail cell and back into prison. So that's the course of action I took. That picture, and now a picture of what up to this point was from yesterday. I woke up yesterday morning, I went to work, and I was drenched in hydraulic fuel because I was breaking down a hydraulic machine, right? Along with cutting other metal pieces and stuff. I was dirty, covered in grease, if you can get that picture. And then last night I was sitting in, I went back to Boston where I grew up, where I did a lot of my ripping and running. And I was sitting in Berkeley Performance Center of Music, listening to Gershwin and Jelly Roll with two really good friends who provided that opportunity and many others as a result of this program and other things. And now this morning I'm here with you at an AA meeting, sharing my experience, strength, and hope. The gap between those two experiences is what this work has provided. So my solutions back then were, like I said, whenever I'd always come up with solutions to the problems in my life, which were living on the streets, chasing alcohol, drugs, and relief from the insanity that they talked about, the thinking that went on in this, that they described, and ending up in those jackpots. And my solutions were, all right, this time it'll be different. I'll get a job, I'll get the bank account, I'll get the girlfriend, I'll get all that stuff. I'll build up this life. And then I'll do just what they described in this book. I'll tear the whole structure down on my head again. Because I won't give up the idea, or I don't even think at that time I knew that there was a possibility, or that I could, or even if I wanted to give up the idea of that relief I got from drinking. And I'll try to confine myself to drinking, but that's another solution. My solution to my alcoholism was to shoot heroin and smoke cocaine. That was my thinking. So I'll go back to that moment. I called somebody I knew around Boston who had some connections, and I followed my escape route, and I went into detox. And then over the course of my life, I've been in and out of AA treatment centers, as they describe in this chapter, institutions, sanitariums, and but something happened, I guess. I just started to reflect. I got that moment of honesty. That something my sponsor had said to me, which I say often, that if I continue to do what I'd always done, I'll always get the same result. So when I got that moment of that bit of willingness that I think is required and that they're emphasizing here, that willingness to do something different, I guess for me, my experience was that I really started to open up and reflect on the stuff that was being shared with me in this book. I'll go back to it. So there is a solution, right? And, you kind of got an idea, I hope, that my solutions never worked out for me. And I had a lot of them. They were always pretty much the same. Get the material, structural things around me, and I'll be okay. And I never put the two together, or even maybe if I did. Because I remember experiences where I'd say to myself, well, I'm only going to go out and have a couple, or do a couple, right? And then at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm broke, my rent money's gone, my food money's gone, I got to go to work, right? And I'm like, shit. How did, like they described now, how did this happen? I wasn't pounding on a bar, I was peeking out a window, the sun's coming up, and it's like, here we go again. Now I'm in the chase of how am I going to get back on my feet? How am I going to keep this up? And for me, I just usually gave it up, I just went to the chase. Don't try to repair it, don't try to build it up, just let it fall down. Run with it as long as you can, and then use your fail-proof escape plan if you don't get arrested first. Go to detox, get in a program, feel a little better, come up with a new plan, come up with a new solution. And it always ended in the same result. So, I read this book the way it's formatted. Like I went through the doctor's opinion, my sponsor said they laid it out that way because maybe they want you to read it that way. In these meetings, we kind of jump around, we do we-agnostics, then go back and forth. But so I read this before we-agnostics. So I had the experience of AA open meetings, and this is an open meeting, but where we speak from the podium, and I found that welcoming. My experience there was it was welcoming. And I heard a lot that I could identify with from the podium, and I had the opportunity to speak from the podium. In my early experience, that was really just about me, looking good, sounding good. And I came to these meetings and I heard a person say, it's hard to be honest and look good up here, or sound good. It just, and that was the case. So I always found it, a welcoming place in AA meetings. So I didn't have that issue. And that speaks to the fellowship itself. But for me, that really wasn't enough, obviously, because I'd go to AA for a little while, I'd run with that, and then I'd go back to the life I had. So this gave me, when I started to read this, it gave me a lot of hope. And to me, like I said, this was about identifying and reflection. And I think for me, the idea, and they talk about it, that the delusion that I am like other people or presently maybe has to be smashed. And I think a lot of people were trying to hand me a lot of hammers along the way and say, here you go, But I was always looking for somebody else to do it for me, and then I would rebel against that. You know, I had to smash that delusion for myself. It couldn't be smashed from the outside. You know, I think it's on page 20 where they talk about the ex-problem drinker who's armed properly with facts about himself can be of use, and that's what my sponsor was. You know, he didn't smash the delusion for me, but he helped me come to see that picture that I was resistant to see so that I could smash that delusion for myself, because I couldn't move forward until I reached that point where I was standing at the edge of the cliff and I saw the bottomless abyss that was before me. And that relates for me in this reading where they talk about go on to the bitter end or pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at my feet, right? So that resonated with me. And this reading for me, this chapter, The Doctor's Opinion More About Alcoholism, helped me to get to the point where I was okay with being able to see, and pardon my language, how fucked up I was. You know, how messy I was. How misguided and confused my thinking was. You know, they talk about, there's a point in here where it says, you know, we were maladjusted to life. I could identify with that. You know, I was the, I can't remember where it is or quote it, but, you know, I was that convict, you know, who just was rebelling against life. You know, I had an argument for everything. And then last week we talked about, we read, you know, contempt prior to investigation. That was me. You know, I was the guy with all kinds of religious theories and prejudice, you know, but never an experience. You know, and at the end of this reading, they talk about the difference between having knowledge of something and having an experience with something. So as I'm reading this and I'm identifying, I'm reflecting, and I'm able to kind of let some of this stuff penetrate my denial, my ego, this image I'm trying to portray, not only to you, which you saw and said, this guy's screwed, but I couldn't see past that. You know, I was more practiced at dishonesty than I am at honesty, but I think it worked better on me than it did on the people around me. The people around me could see that, you know, I was dishonest, but for me, I couldn't see past that. There's so much in here that you know, the illness, and we've come to believe it an illness, right? The physical allergy, right? And then the mental side of it. For me, this was really, I had a little bit of struggle with the allergy part of it, and I kind of de-emphasized that over the mental part of it, you know, because when the doctor says that the main problem of the alcoholic exists in his mind, I could identify, you know, yeah. I could identify with the thinking problem because, you know, I always got frustrated in my head. So, you know, I'm powerless, right? I need to come to believe in a power greater than myself. I need willingness to find this power. So driven here under the lash of my own insanity through the use and abuse of drugs and alcohol, I'm put in a position where I can't drink in safety. One drink's going to get me drunk, right? But I can see the fact that I just can't seem to give up this idea that it's going to be different somehow. So I'm at that point of reality that nothing's going to change if nothing changes. So what am I going to do? So I make the decision to, and for me, my experience at that point, making that the decision in this chapter to say, okay, I'm going to give this a try, right? I haven't reached that further part where I make a formal decision. But for me, it was a relief, right? The weight was taken off my shoulder, right? My sponsor said to me, And you know, the we agnostics in this second step of this part was, you know, all these ideas and arguments and faults I'd found with religion coming off of we agnostics and stuff, set that stuff aside, if you can. Just set it aside, right? Because we're not talking about here, you know, knowledge of the scriptures, right? But there is like this point where they talk about many take up their beds and walk again. For me, that held significance because it reminded me of when a prophet, you know, did a healing, and I want to stay, you know, away from specific religion. So, and the person was able to get up, take up his bed, and walk again, right? And I'd read that over and over again, so it resonated with me. So it meant new life, you know, a lot. But I'm going to lose my train of thought if I keep going off on this stuff. So I'm at the point where I'm willing to give this, and it's a relief, because I could, I guess, admit at that point that I didn't know everything. I didn't have to have the solution. I didn't have to have the answer. I just had to follow directions. And I'll relate it to something like the job that I was just describing to you. I have no knowledge of any mechanical stuff like that, right? I like taking stuff apart, and I can get to that point, but putting it back together is not a strong suit of mine. So for me, at that job, I was able to go in and finding this new freedom in not having to know everything or appear to know everything, which was a great defense of mine, right? I know, I'll get to that part. It allowed me the freedom to say, yeah, I'm not sure how to do that, and let somebody show me and learn. Because in my mindset was, if I didn't know something, that made me vulnerable to everybody else, and people were a threat, right? That it made me look weaker or inferior. So my sponsor once said to me, Corey, you know, it's hard to teach anybody something that always says, I know. You know, I know. Well, if you know, why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you doing anything with it? So I really didn't know. But there was a freedom for me in reading this and identifying this stuff, and that the idea that they're pointing to, that my solution must come. I must find a power greater than myself. My solution has to come from that power. And I didn't have to know everything there was to know about it. I could set aside all this stuff, all these preconceived ideas and notions I had about God for an experience with God, following a set of directions and seeing what happens in that course. And, you know, faith for me, you know, belief in the things yet seen, realized, I'm a kind of a touchy, hands-on guy, right? I want to see it. And the fellowship provided me with that, especially meetings like this at this time when I was going through this work. I went to a meeting faithfully in Boston, the Alston Group, and I got to listen to guys' stories, and I was able to identify it, and that was where I put my faith, I think, at the beginning, was in those people and what they were saying about themselves, and what the result was as a result of this work. You know, I'll relate one story. A guy in that meeting, he would talk about being one of those people in New York who lived in a box and would come out and spray your windshield, clean it. Well, that's the story he related, but the person I saw in front of me, I thought the guy worked at like Harvard and he was a professor or something. So the transition was like, and that gave me the willingness, the belief that, okay, there's something here that may work for me too, and I don't have to know what it is. I can say, I don't know. And there's a great relief in that, for me, that was in my experience. So they talk about medical, psychiatric, social, and religious, you know, and they want to stay out of controversy. I had enough of my own. The idea that I could find, a concept of a God of my own understanding, you know, again, I was able to just set aside everything I think I know about God for an experience with God, right? Or this God of my understanding, this higher power. So I'll go back to identification again. How many times have people said to us, I can take it and leave it alone, why can't he? Why don't you drink like a gentleman? That fellow can handle his liquor, why can't you try beer or wine? So, switching from hard stuff to this, from alcohol to heroin to cocaine, whatever, pills, the switch back and forth to try to manage all this stuff and work it out. I identified with the failure in that for me. The real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I could see that, when I'm functioning in something of a right mind, in my insanity, and then when I'm drinking or drugging, and I have no regard for anybody or anything other than me and what I need. And it kind of went back to, I think it might be more about alcoholism, where we talk about the alcoholic leading a double life, and I really felt that I was somebody on the inside that I didn't want to portray or you to know about on the outside. So this stuff I related to and identified, and it just helped me get to that, to open up that bit of willingness and reasonableness in order to go on with this program. I didn't like when they get to talking about, well, not that I didn't like it, but I don't really saddle up to challenge, right? It's really challenging. I'm not too big on saddling up to that. But when they get to the crux or at the meat of it, they say, there is a solution. None of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride and the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. I'm going to have to do some work. I don't like work. If I don't have to, right? I like the idea that God's going to do all this, but there's a person who, shares, and he said, yeah, God's going to do the work, but bring a shovel, right? So, what do they taught? Self-searching. I thought I had a pretty good picture of myself, but I really didn't have a clue. I tried. What I had was this false image I made up in my mind about the nice guy I was while I was, taking stuff that didn't belong to me with total disregard of other people and the effort and the work and what that might mean to them. The leveling of pride, and the confession of shortcomings. As far as I knew, I didn't have any shortcomings, but. So that was something that was going to come, and at this point, looking at that little paragraph, and this book is all kinds of highlighted, so at some point in time, this stuff resonated. The two have to come together for me, because I know at this point I'm not going to do this. I'm not capable of doing it. I'm not even really probably willing to do this, although I'm desperate to get out of my situation and change the way I feel and my life. I don't know that I'm going to do this. So hence there comes the need for this power greater than myself to do it for me, or to help me do it, or to do most of the heavy lifting, or give me a lot of lunch breaks, whatever. So for me, those two kind of came together. That this insanity that rests in my mind, there's a course of action I'm going to have to follow. I can't solve this. If I'm able to connect to this power greater than myself, I'll find my way through this. So the testimony of this, the certain American businessman and his conversation with the doctor, right? So at this point, my experience is I'm walking down this kind of path of my life. My sponsor's helping me by holding my hand and saying, it's not that bad, you can look at it. It's not that bad, you can look. There is a solution. but you have to first see that there's a real problem, and you have to see the extent of the problem. You know, you have to see it. You have to be willing to look at it, because it's in that message of depth and weight. For me, I found the willingness to do that self-searching, allowing my pride and my fear to be diminished so that I could reach that point of successful consummation. To look at the fact of my life, you know, how many of my family members, friends, people who tried to help me got affected every time I would show promise of overcoming this problem and then go right back and do the same thing. And that's probably the first time I actually started considering other people's feelings. So, you know, when the doctor, when he talks about the hopelessness and they talk about never, you know, I wasn't able to be fully honest with psychologists, doctors, people in treatment centers, family members, myself, or anybody else, for that matter. So they couldn't be of real help to me. But I was able to reach that point with my sponsor as he disclosed himself to me and was able to help me trust him and the people in those meetings enough to say, okay, I can look at this. I can see the futility of my life going the way I'm going. You know, with my solutions, this is what I'm going to get. With this solution, there's a chance my life can be different, right? And then it gets back to, you know, having good religious ideals and principles, being a good church member, and then having an experience with God, or the God of my understanding. So I followed the directions laid out in this book. And 4 and some odd months ago, I was on that bench in Blackstone Park next to the cathedral housing projects that I had grown up in, done a lot of my drinking and drugging in. Last night, I was at a place of employment where I've been for the best part of that 4.5 some odd years, which has never been an experience in my life. I went to a place that I'd walked by many a times and seen a lot of people lives growing and stretching, and they were learning and they were expressing and they were sharing in that music center. And today, I'm able to sit at this table and share with you the experience as a result of this work and practicing this stuff on a daily basis in my life. That we have a solution that works. My relationship with the God of my understanding, you know, this morning I wake up and, you know, the conversation, something like, you know, God, empty me so that you can fill me. You know, keep me away from a drink and a drug, you know, and just be where my feet are. You know, it's pretty simple. I'm not I haven't joined a religious body. Kind of just try to stay in touch with this power, whatever it is. I don't need to know. I don't know. I don't know. Don't ask me. I don't know. But it works. I have the experience in my life of this power, this idea, this God idea working in my life, just from those 2 snapshots. You know, I'm grateful to be here, grateful that you're here. And I always learn, everything I learn from what's out there. So thank you, and I look forward to it.